Hello, people. How's it going? First Battle of Bull Run, called the First Battle of Manassas by the Confederate forces, was the first major battle of the American Civil War. The battle was fought on July 21st, 1861, in Prince William County, Virginia, just north of what is now the city of Manassas, and about 30 miles west-southwest of Washington, D.C. The Union Army was slow in positioning themselves. Yeah, no, really? Allowing Confederate reinforcements time to arrive by rail. Yeah. Each side had about 18,000 poorly trained and poorly led troops. They did that. The battle was a Confederate victory because pretty much the uniforms were all mixed up. And the Union was wearing gray for some of them, and some of them were wearing blue on the other side. So, okay, we need to. Literally, there were different uniforms. They were firing at each other. Sometimes they didn't know who was the enemy until they were being fired at or not fired at. Anyway, let's see. I mean, it's where Stonewall Jackson got his name. This is where General Sherman was there. Joseph E. Johnston was there. McDowell was the leader commander of the Union forces. Johnson was the owner of the Confederacy. I mean, it was a mess. It is called the Great Skedaddle for a reason, because pretty much the Union really wasn't expecting much of a fight. They really weren't. When the war began, they figured, okay, one major engagement, the South will be wiped out, the Army will be defeated, and the war will be over within months. And well, it took 4 years, about 600,000 lives later, and then it was over. But, the belligerents, as I said, it was Union, Confederacy, commanders, Union, Irving McDowell for the Union, Joseph E. Johnston and P.T. Beauregard for the Confederacy. The units involved the Department of Northeastern Virginia, also called the Army of Northeastern Virginia, the Department of Pennsylvania. Eventually, it would become the Army of the Potomac. It took a while to change. Just like it took a while to get to a good commander who knew what they were doing and wanted to win the war in the first place. And on the Confederate side, the Army of the Potomac, the Army of Shenandoah, see what the mess it was? I mean, literally, there were regiments who were Confederates wearing blue, and there were regiments in the Union wearing gray. The uniforms were not coherent, they weren't cohesive, and it wasn't yet to the blue and the gray yet. Because it was a lot of just, they literally did think this was going to be one battle. The Confederacy wasn't really prepared. The Union overestimated what they were fighting, or underestimated what they were up against. They really did think this was going to be one major battle. The South would be beaten, and the Civil War would have ended. But that's not how it happened. The Army of Northeastern Virginia, the Union, had about 18,000 engaged, but they had about 35,000 there. Well, I should say prepared. You got to remember, we were not prepared for the Civil War. The American Army was very small. I mean, literally, they were almost starting from ground zero to create an army to fight a Civil War. We were not ready to fight a Civil War. We weren't even ready to fight anything, let alone each other. I mean, it took a while for the Army of the Potomac, and I will give McClellan credit. General McClellan, once he was put in charge, made the Army of the Potomac what it became, a fighting organization, a fighting unit. He did that much. He was a terrible commander. But as a general who created an army, he knew what he was doing. He did all right. I will give him credit for that, reluctantly, because I think he was a schmuck. But the casualties for such a major beginning of the war, 481 killed on the Union side, 1,011 wounded, 1,200 missing on the Union side. The Confederate side, 387 killed, 1,500 wounded, 1113 missing. They probably ran away. Just months after the start of the war at Fort Sumter, in April 12, 1861, of course, the Northern public clamored for a march against the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, which was expected to bring an early end to the Confederacy. Yielding to political pressure, Brigadier General Irving McDowell led his unseasoned army across Bull Run against the equally inexperienced Confederate army of Brigadier General P.T.G. Beauregard. who was the man who ordered the firing on Fort Sumter and began the Civil War, whose forces were camped near Manassas Junction. McDowell's ambitious plan for a massive flank attack on the Confederate left was poorly executed. No, really? We weren't ready. We went into war against each other, ill-prepared, ill-equipped, ill-everything. And I keep saying this for a reason, we really went into this very naive. We went into fighting this war very, very naive, thinking it was going to be over in a few months in one major battle. Sherman knew this wasn't going to happen. He knew it was going to take a long time. Let's see. McDowell's ambitious plan for a surprise flank attack on the Confederate left was poorly executed, although the Confederates, who had been planning to attack the Union left flank, found themselves at initial disadvantage. Confederate reinforcements under Brigadier General Joseph E. Johnston arrived from the Shenandoah Valley by railroad, and of course the battle quickly changed, into a cluster, into one big mess. The Brigade of Virginians under a relatively unknown Brigadier General from VMI, the Virginia Military Institute, Thomas J. Jackson, also known as Stonewall Jackson, who was a little slightly overrated. I'm sorry, he was. Stood its ground, which resulted in Jackson receiving his famous nickname, Stonewall. The Confederates launched a strong counterattack, and as the Union troops began withdrawing under fire, also known as the Great Skedaddle, because they were running back to Washington with their tails between their legs, because they'd never been fired on before. These weren't soldiers, not yet anyway. These were just people said this will be a great adventure. No, it won't. I mean, they literally were sending two armies of very inexperienced. I mean, it would be like a bunch of kindergartners going to battle against a bunch of other kindergartners. It was that organized. We stood its ground, which was listening. Confederates launched a strong counterattack, and as the Union troops began withdrawing under fire, many panicked, and the retreat turned into a rout, which it was. McDowell's men frantically ran without orders in the direction of war. They ran. It's called the Great Skedaddle. An American Civil War historian knows when you say the Great Skedaddle, they know what you're talking about. Both armies were sobered by the fierce fighting, which they were. They really began to realize, okay, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be a bloody affair. This is going to be a bloody war. And many casualties, and realized that the war was going to be much longer and bloodier than either had anticipated. The First Battle of Bull Run highlighted many of the problems and deficiencies that were typical at the first year of the war, and it did. The American Army barely really existed before the Civil War. It really wasn't. It's hard to explain, but it really was it didn't exist. I mean, it did, but it was so small and insignificant and so mismanaged and this, that, and the other that it was a joke. Not a funny one, by the way. The First Battle of Bull Run highlighted many of the problems, as I said, deficiencies that were typical of the first year of the war. Units were committed to piecemeal, attacks were frontal, infantry failed to detect exposed artillery, tactical intelligence was minimal, and neither commander was able to employ his whole force effectively. McDowell, with 35,000 men, could commit only about 18,000 of them, and the combined Confederate forces of 32,000 also committed only 18,000. I mean, see if I can find a map. See if I can find a decent map. I think I can find a map. Right. Here we go. I'm not going to be able to see it, but I don't think you can see it right in the freaking sun. Sorry, the sun is the picture. Sorry, I don't have the skill to do certain things right now. Let's see if I can. Well, that's silly. I'm going to have to find some other books that are bigger to do this. But the fact of the matter is, Battle of Bull Run really was how to go into war and realize you're not prepared after the fact. I mean, it was not the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, but it certainly demonstrated the American military union and the Confederacy were for not a very easy war. But yeah, it was the story of the Stonewall legend General Sherman was there, McDowell, P.T. Beauregard. Now, I'm going to show a few books I have, relatively speaking. He's an excellent author on the Battle of Civil War. I have he did a very good book on the Battle of the Alamo. But he's a very good author. Very excellent book on the Battle of Bull Run. Because there were skirmishes before Battle of Bull Run. Not a major one, just skirmishes here and there. He records those. Excellent book. I recommend him. Whatever he's written, he's good at. I do like his books. As I live in Minnesota, must promote the 1st Minnesota in the Battle of Bull Run. Because, they were there. Yay, Minnesota. Anyway, excellent book. Excellent author. But yes. We were there. Minnesota was there. We have much to be proud of. This book, the next two is just because they're interesting. They're good. They're short, little good descriptions of the battle. They have a lot of information. I like this book. I have probably read this book more than any when it covers the entire war, before, during, and after. I like this book. This is a good reference book. This is an excellent book on the basics of the battles. I've always liked this book. I always will. This is probably one of the very first I've read on the complete history of the war. But anyway, this one is pretty good. This one details all the major battles of the war. I picked this one by other books. I'm trying not to show all the same books I usually show when I do a book recommendation during this, because I do have a lot of books on the Civil War. I would like to show the other ones I have. I mean, I've already shown the one on the Army of the Tennessee and Lee's Army and Army of the Potomac. I've shown those books. I'll show them again some other time, but I do want to show some of the other books that deal with either the entire war or, in this case, the Battle of Bull Run. This is a good book. It's an excellent book. I mean, I have books on P.T. Beauregard, and I have books on Sherman, and I have books on other people who were at the first Battle of Bull Run. I do have one on Stonewall Jackson. But the Battle of Bull Run really did demonstrate that we were not ready for a war. That we really were going into this naive. And we really thought that the other side would just give up. Now, granted, technically, not even really technically, but the North in the first Battle of Bull Run pretty much proved that, we give up, we're going to run away now. But that had more to do with the tactics being given, the weaponry being given, the training. They were barely trained. This was barely really an army. I mean, it really was. It really was a ragtag bunch of people thrown together, handed the rifles, and go fight the Confederacy. Yeah, that's kind of how it was. It's like, okay, we'll give you some basic military training. You only have to do this for 3 months. And I think it was 3 months. I think it was 3 month enlistments in the beginning, before it became a lot longer. When they began to realize this war is going to take a lot longer, and it's going to cost a lot more lives. Hot chocolate or chocolate milk. I know in the movie Gods and Generals, there's the Battle of Bull Run. I don't know how I would recommend it because I don't remember if it's any good. It's in the movie, of course. But for the most part, I can't think of any movies that actually care. But I wish I could recommend the movie. I mean, the movie Gettysburg does a good job, but that's Gettysburg. Look, Gods and Generals is not bad when it just does the battles. So maybe in that case, yeah, it's okay. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. So I neither recommend it nor not recommend it. I just realize it's in there, watch it, realize it's not completely historical. It never is. And it might give you an idea of First Manassas. Now, Stephen Lang does a good job as Longstreet. Stephen Lang does a very good job as Stonewall Jackson in the movie. I remember that much. He does a better job as Pickett, though, in Gettysburg, but that's digressing. But the Battle of First Manassas really was an eye-opener because neither side really was ready to fight a major war or fight a major battle. And I'm serious. The uniforms were so different almost on every. Different regiments had different uniforms. Different groups had different uniforms. There literally was the Union wearing gray and some people in the Confederacy wearing blue, and it's like, who's who? Until they started firing at you, you didn't know. It was a mess. And the beginning was doing just fine, and all of a sudden, oh, there's more of them than there are of us. But it is an interesting beginning of the war because it really, really, really showed the deficiencies and really showed the need for far better training, far better everything on both sides. The Confederacy in the beginning had the better generals in a sense that they were being allowed to fight. Part of the Union problem in the beginning until Grant took over was that too many of the Union generals were political generals. They were too busy worrying about not winning, while Grant knew what had to happen to win. Lee wanted to win. The Confederacy wanted to win the war. The Union, it all depends on the general a lot of times. A lot of them didn't want to defeat the Confederacy. They didn't care. Slavery didn't matter to them. They didn't care. McClellan didn't care. He built a great army. The Army of the Potomac has a lot to be thankful and grateful for by McClellan. And I'm not a McClellan guy. I cannot stand the man. I think he's a terrible general. An absolute. He was not good. He was good at making a good army, but he didn't want to use it. I mean, he didn't. That was part of his problem. He was always outnumbered. Every battle he was ever in, he was always outnumbered by 1,000 billion Confederates. It's like, McClellan, you have more men than they do. You've always had more men than they do. McClellan was never outnumbered. Except in the mind of McClellan. But anyway, McClellan wasn't even a little big built little run. So much why I'm talking about. But no, McDowell was okay. He had an inexperienced army. But anyway, it is an interesting subject. It is the first major battle of First Manassas. Second Manassas is next month. That's in August, late August. So that isn't McDowell. That will be Pope. General John Pope, whose biography I do have. So I will recommend that when it comes up. Okay, people. I'm done rambling about the first Bull Run. I like the American Civil War. It's my second favorite history subject. World War II being the first, the American Civil War the second, and everything else third. Anyway, here's me. Well, people, like, share, comment, subscribe. Good grief, root beer and chocolate milk do not mix. Behave yourselves, because I'm not going to. I don't know how. Later.